I think the Monaco Grand Prix sort of mimicked the movie Don't Worry Darling. It looked great visually, it had a strong setup, it hinted at a possible plot twist in the future, and you think, wow, this might actually surprise me. And then it ends exactly how you expected from the beginning. Now, in all fairness, I did not see the movie Don't Worry Darling, but I did watch the Monaco Grand Prix, and like everybody online, I have opinions, so let's dive in. Starting with the practice sessions, Ferrari dominated every single one of the practices, and by Ferrari, I mean Charles Leclerc. And he gave everyone the hope that he would win his first Grand Prix of the season, and his home Grand Prix, no less. There were a couple of incidents in the practice sessions that caused red flags, especially at turn 10 coming out of the tunnel and into the chicane, but they weren't major incidents. The reason why they were red flagged is because the Monaco Grand Prix is so narrow that there's no way the marshals can go onto the track and avoid the cars coming. But all these red flags gave me the expectation that we would have at least 2 of them during the race, and it would make things very exciting. There were a few bigger incidents, especially in free practice 1, where Charles Leclerc hit the back of Lance Stroll's car. Now, Lance was supposed to let Charles through because there was a blue flag, but he didn't, and it ended in a collision. This incident caused Charles Leclerc's front wing to sort of detach from the car and get stuck under it, which means that I can take off one more thing from my bingo card this year. But the one who came out worse in the situation was Lance Stroll, because he got 1 grid penalty for the race and he had to replace the back of his car. And for those who don't know, hitting the back of your car is a lot more expensive than the front. Hamilton also had an unfortunate incident in free practice 3 at turn 4 where he hit the wall and lost his wheel. Moving on to qualifying, it was definitely not Mercedes' day or weekend. They had a terrible weekend. First, we had an incident with Antonelli where he crashed in the chicane in the last lap of the first qualifying session. He sort of pulled a Franco Colapinto in this because he had already qualified for Q2 in 15th place, but he wasn't able to participate in the next session. And because the session got red flagged in the last lap, all the cars that were behind him got their times deleted and the session ended there. But this is not where Mercedes' misfortunes end, because in Q2, George Russell's car just stopped working completely. And this is the first time since Imola 2022 where both Mercedes do not make it into Q3. But someone who did make it into Q3 was Esteban Ocon in his Haas, and he celebrated on the radio with his engineer, and it was a very wholesome moment. The top of the starting grid ended with Lando Norris on pole, Charles Leclerc second, and Oscar Piastri third. I have to admit, I was a little bit disappointed. I really wanted Charles Leclerc to get on pole and win his home race, especially since he had been leading every single practice session until the end of qualifying. On the other hand, I am really proud of Lando Norris because this is a track that punishes small mistakes very severely, and he didn't make a single one in the entire weekend, unlike Oscar, which actually surprised me. For the starting grid, we had 2 drivers serving penalties. Lance Stroll had a 1 grid penalty for his incident with Charles Leclerc in free practice 1, and Oliver Bearman had a 10-place grid penalty for overtaking Carlos Sainz in free practice 2 during a red flag, which means that both Alpines that were starting at the back of the grid got promoted to starting 17th and 18th respectively. Now, something that we have to take into account for this race is that because it is so hard to overtake in Monaco, the FIA came up with a new rule to sort of spice things up. And it is that each car has to serve a minimum of 2 pit stops during the race or serve a 30-second penalty per pit stop. The start of the race was actually pretty interesting. Lando Norris locked up in the first corner, and I genuinely thought he was going into the wall and Leclerc would take pole position. However, he was able to control the car and continue in first place. Still in the first lap, Bortoleto overtakes Antonelli at the hairpin, and Antonelli tries to repeat a favor at the chicane. However, that ends with Bortoleto in the wall and a yellow flag. This yellow flag caused a few of the cars in the back of the grid to do their first of their 2 pit stops, and Bortoleto was actually able to get out of the wall and continue with the race. A few laps later, Pierre Gasly loses his brakes, hitting the back of Yuki Tsunoda's car coming out of the tunnel, and cuts the chicane, almost taking out his own teammate Franco Colapinto and ending with the Monaco 2023. Thankfully, Franco was able to avoid him, but Pierre Gasly's front wing detached from the car and it ended with a double-waved yellow flag. However, in my opinion, it should have been at least a safety car, if not a red flag, because some of the cars almost ran over it. By lap 20, Hadjar had already completed his 2 pit stops, and he was able to do this by a sort of controversial strategy from VCAP. Basically, his teammate Liam Lawson was driving behind him very slowly, sort of stopping all the cars so that Isaac Hadjar had enough time to go into the pit stops and not lose a single position. After this came the McLaren pit stop for Oscar Piastri, and it sucked again. It was very, very slow, to the point where their new strategy was to wait and hope for a safety car to show up. Lap 38 came and we had the unfortunate DNF of Fernando Alonso because his car was smoking from the back. Now, he was smart enough to be able to put his car at the exit of turn 1, which meant that his car wasn't in the way and there was only a yellow flag for a couple of seconds. But there truly seems to be a curse for Fernando Alonso this year, because he is having the worst luck imaginable. We got to lap 42, and this is the moment where any hope for some excitement during the race truly died. Williams had seen what VCAP did at the beginning of the race, with one car holding everyone else back so that the other one could pit without a problem, and they did the exact same thing, to the extreme. Sainz held the entire grid back while Albon was able to do his pit stops, and then they swapped positions so that Sainz could do the pit stops while Albon held everyone back. And it took quite a few laps to do that, so it got really boring in the back of the grid. Now, James Vowles and both of the drivers said that this is not the way that they want to drive, this is not really racing, but with what VCAP had done, they didn't really have any choice because they were barely in the points. I have to admit, I found the strategy a bit funny at the beginning, but it got tedious really quickly, and I wasn't the only one who thought that. So did George Russell. George decided to overtake Albon at the chicane and said on the radio, "I'll take the penalty." Now, I don't blame George for trying to overtake Albon. Mind you, it took him 10 laps to do it, but saying on the radio was just stupid. And that's what the FIA thought. So instead of giving him the expected 10-second penalty, he got a drive-through. If you're wondering what a drive-through penalty is, basically the driver has to go into the pit stops, stop, not get anything changed, and then get out. Doesn't count for the 2 pit stops either. Now, I don't know what it is about George Russell getting frustrated during the races, but I always find it really funny. After the race, George made a post on Instagram where he said that Albon had to pay the next dinner, and Albon answered, "I'll take you to a drive-through." In the end, they did go to dinner together and Albon posted the receipts, literally. But back to the race, we're almost on lap 70 and neither of the Mercedes have made a single pit stop. Toto Wolff said in an interview that they forgot about this rule, but I'm not really sure if he was joking or not. Either way, their strategy for this weekend sucked. Now, Mercedes decided to do the same thing that VCAP and Williams had done, and Antonelli held the entire grid back while George Russell pitted twice. I'm not really sure why they decided to do this, because either way, if he lost positions or not, George would never have gotten into the points. The front of the grid was pretty uninteresting at this point as well. There was a moment where it looked like Charles Leclerc was going to overtake Lando Norris for pole position, but it's Monaco and it never ended up happening. The only person who I am aware was able to do overtakes during this race was Lance Stroll. And they were pretty good overtakes as well, they just didn't show them on TV. So the race ended with Lando Norris as the winner, P2 Charles Leclerc, and P3 Oscar Piastri. I sort of get what the FIA was trying to do with the forced 2 pit stops. It seemed like a good idea at the beginning, however, I feel like they should have predicted the strategies that the teams would use. In the end, it didn't really add much excitement to the race, it just added a lot of confusion because the back of the grid got lapped twice by the front of the grid. And if I hadn't been looking at the telemetry, I would have had no idea what was happening. In conclusion, I enjoyed the weekend as a whole. I really think that the free practices and the qualifying were interesting, however, the race itself was very underwhelming. George Russell actually gave a couple of colorful suggestions on what they should do to make the race more interesting.
Yeah, I've got a really good idea.
Go on.
So every driver has a button that they get a chance to put the sprinklers on around the track. So you get a choice if you want to do it in qualifying or in the race, but you can only do it once in the whole weekend.
Right. But every driver has that.
Every driver, yeah. I think okay, one driver from one team then.
You've got a golden ticket under your seat.
Yeah, and then the sprinklers come on, spices it up a bit.
Yeah.
You don't know when it's going to happen. I think that's the only solution.
My personal suggestion to improve the Monaco Grand Prix, which I got inspired by a tweet I saw about another race, is that we should give each driver a free pass to cut the chicane once, maybe twice during the race. This would avoid the whole train situation where one teammate is stopping everyone else while the other one pits, and it would also create a little bit more excitement, because what would happen if Charles Leclerc could have overtaken Lando Norris at the end of the race? So the strategy would be based around when to use the free pass and trying to figure out when the other teams are going to use the free pass, and it would also avoid too much strategizing, because it is a split-second decision that has to be made by the driver. I had some technical difficulties with my Monaco Grand Prix preview video, but I was able to write down my predictions and the predictions of AI, so we're going to see how we did. Now, my predictions were Charles Leclerc on P1, which was wrong, Lando Norris on P2, which was wrong as well, and Max Verstappen in P3, which was wrong as well. I got 0 out of 3. ChatGPT predicted Oscar Piastri in first place, which was wrong, Charles Leclerc in second place, which was right, and Fernando Alonso in P3, which was definitely wrong. And Gemini predicted Lando Norris in first place, which was correct, Charles Leclerc in second, which was also correct, and Oscar Piastri in third place, which was also right. So congratulations Google, you got everything right. This was all for my Monaco recap. Let me know down in the comments what you thought about the race and what are your suggestions to improve the Monaco Grand Prix, because we still have a contract of quite a few years with this track. This week we are ending our triple header with Barcelona, so stay tuned for that video, and as always, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and follow me on Instagram to see more content about Formula 1, and I'll see you all next time.